unless you've been living under a rock, I'm sure you've seen, heard about, maybe even participated in some of the protests that are going on all across the country in opposition to police brutality against Black people.
Yeah, and with all of the uproar going on with the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, we think it's necessary that you all know the legal standard for when a police officer can use deadly force against someone, and why the officer that killed Mr. Floyd has only been charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter.
I'm a young Black man doing all that I can to stand over when I look around and I see what's being done to my kind. Every day I'm being hurt to this grave. My people don't want no trouble. We've got enough struggle. I just wanna live. God protect me. Just stay right by my side. I just wanna live.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in.
Make sure you like our video and subscribe to the Ladies-in-Law.
Yeah, you know that little heart and thumbs up at the bottom of your screen? Click it before you do anything else.
Right, because legal news like this is too hot to miss, and we're bringing it to you every Thursday at 3 p.m. I'm Rippy.
And I'm Shay.
And we're the Ladies-in-Law.
Where we're ripping and shaking up all the legal information you know, need to know, and want to know.
From the tabloids to the courthouse to your own home.
This week, after the horrific death of Mr. George Floyd, it is so important that we, as not only just attorneys, but criminal defense attorneys, educate all of you on the legal standards that are involved when a police officer is making an arrest or using any type of force in doing that. So we have to start with the bottom line, which is, what does a police officer need in order to even arrest a person? And that is called probable cause. The police officer must have probable cause to arrest someone. And probable cause can come from an anonymous tip of somebody committing a crime, a police officer observing suspicious activity that could be criminal activity. And in the case of Mr. Floyd, it was he received a call from the cashier saying that Mr. Floyd was trying to use a fake $20 bill in order to purchase whatever items he was purchasing. And that was enough to create probable cause to have him arrested.
Right. So if the police officer finds probable cause and is attempting to make an arrest, but the person ends up resisting the police, which means that the person is resisting the police by force or exhibiting some type of threat of force in opposition to the arrest, that basically gives the police officer the authority in turn to use force to make that arrest when they have this lawful probable cause. And when police officers are using this force to make an arrest, they really have somewhat unfettered discretion, just short of using deadly force.
Yeah, they do.
So they can kick someone, they can punch them, they can pin them down, they can tase them, really whatever it takes to restrain this person in order to make that arrest. Now, if the police officer decides that he or she needs to use deadly force, there's a legal standard that they have to meet.
Absolutely.
So the police officer needs to reasonably believe that the person that they're trying to arrest is presenting a threat or a very imminent or close threat of some type of force that is likely to cause death or substantial bodily harm. And in this reasonable belief is that a very objective standard. The officer doesn't need to be actually correct. For example, in Cleveland, officers who ended up after going on a 22-mile high-speed chase, shooting into a vehicle that they believed had a gun in it. They felt like they had possibly seen a gun or heard a gun go off. They ended up shooting up the vehicle and killing the 2 passengers, which they were found to act reasonably based on their belief that there was a gun involved in the situation.
So it's really case by case, and it's super circumstantial.
Very, that is the case. Every case is different based on the circumstances involved. Now, if an officer is able to detain a person without using deadly force, which is wonderful, then after that person has been restrained and subdued, the officer should cease using force, because force is no longer necessary to make that arrest.
Right, and this is all in like a blink of an eye. I mean, these are decisions being made very quickly, but there still are these reasonable legal standards in place. And in the case of Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis, the officers claimed that he resisted arrest. So for explanation's sake on our behalf, sure, he resisted arrest. Okay, and because he resisted, the officer had the ability and was allowed to kneel on him until he was subdued. And the moment, though, he was subdued, officer, you got to get off. So the moment
they should have just cuffed him,
and you know, it's kind of still up for debate whether he was cuffed already or not, but the moment he was cuffed, and that could have happened way before 8 minutes passed, that officer should have stood up and gotten off of him. And clearly, video footage and photos show that in this case, the officer went way too far and failed to do that, and that is why he's being charged with 3rd-degree murder and 2nd-degree manslaughter. And, well, you know, some people are upset about that, and I understand it. Why isn't he being charged straight-out murder? I mean, 8 minutes. He kneeled on him. He didn't need to. Mr. Floyd was subdued. He was begging, "I cannot breathe," going unconscious.
All of it was on video.
All on video. Why is he only being charged, Jasmine, with 3rd-degree murder and manslaughter?
So I will break it down for you all. So most of you may not have even heard of 3rd degree because it's only 3rd-degree murder because it's only in 3 states. It's in Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Florida. Most states only have the 1st-degree murder and 2nd-degree murder. So we'll start with 1st-degree murder.
Yeah.
1st-degree murder is premeditated murder, which means that someone came up with a plan before they committed the murder.
It's like the typical murder that you
followed through and actually killed that person as they planned. So this is the most serious type of murder. This comes with life in prison or the death penalty for states that have it. I know Michigan, we only have life in prison, so that's the penalty for 1st-degree murder.
Hey, you're a real sicko if you're doing that.
Now, one step below that is 2nd-degree murder, which means that maybe there wasn't a plan, but this person actually intended to kill. So when they were committing whatever act they committed that killed someone, they specifically intended in their mind, I want to kill this person. I'm doing this to kill this person.
Yeah.
So that's 2nd-degree murder. 3rd-degree murder in Minnesota is, and the 2 other states we said, Florida and Pennsylvania, that have it, it means that this person killed someone, but there was no premeditation,
right.
And there was not a specific intent to kill. It just means that this person acted with what we call a depraved heart or mind, which means that they had absolutely no regard whatsoever for the value of human life.
Human life, generally, yeah.
So, I mean, they may not have necessarily meant to kill someone, but their actions were just like, they acted so recklessly that they didn't care if someone died or not. And this charge is typically brought against someone who shoots in a crowd. So, I mean, they meant to shoot the gun up, but, you know, if someone dies, they didn't specifically intend to kill that person. Or let's say someone decides to drive their car through a crowded intersection. They may not have specifically intended to kill someone, but, you know, they didn't care, and it was very, you know that
somebody's going to get hurt.
Thought that somebody can get very hurt or killed in that case. Now, when it comes to George Floyd's case, you know, it seems like the officer did not have any type of premeditation or any type of plan, especially if they're responding to a call that he committed some type of crime. You know, it seems like there's no premeditation to rise to the level of first degree.
Right.
Now, as far as second degree murder, it's really up to debate, whether the officer intended to kill him by kneeling on him and cutting off his circulation for 8-9 minutes. Some people say yes, he intended to do that, but that's very hard to prove because you have to really approve what was going on in somebody's mind. Whereas with a third degree, the depraved heart, reckless, I don't care about somebody's life, that's an objective standard. It's not subjective. You don't have to get into somebody's mind. You can just say, look, their actions objectively based on reasonable person's observations showed that they didn't care at all. So I think that's why the prosecutors in Minnesota ended up deciding to charge the officer with third degree murder versus second degree because they felt like it was easier to prove. The video clearly shows the officer had no regard for George Floyd's life, that there was a depraved heart and depraved mind that he had during that time.
No, and it's important that the prosecutors are able to prove and punish him in some form. And fortunately, also they're able to also charge him with manslaughter. Right.
And another thing I was going to say is that in the states that do not have second degree murder, that do not have third degree murder, the officer would have likely been only charged with manslaughter, which Amina's going to talk about, which is a lower level offense with less time. So actually, it's actually good in this case that Minnesota has that third degree. I know people are upset and it sounds very frustrating because it's like, he clearly killed this man. This is, we have all the evidence. What the heck? But at the same time, the law is constructed to protect innocent people. At the same time, yes, we want to punish people who've done wrong, but there's certain procedures and standards in place to protect innocent people. But at the same time, like I said, if it was another state, for example, Michigan, where we don't have third degree murder, this officer would have likely been charged with manslaughter, which carries less time and less penalties than third degree murder, which is what he was charged with.
Right, and so luckily they're able to double up essentially. He's being charged with third degree murder and he's also being charged with second degree manslaughter. And in Minnesota, a person can be convicted for second degree manslaughter so long as the prosecutors are able to prove that 1 out of 5 of the ways under the Minnesota law they acted in that way. So just 1 out of the 5. And in Floyd's case, the prosecutors could argue that the officer created an unreasonable risk and consciously took chances of causing death or great bodily harm to Mr. Floyd. The videos say it all. He 8 minutes kneeling on his neck. That's an unreasonable risk. And he was consciously aware of what he was doing. Nobody was forcing the officer to do those actions whatsoever.
Right.
So for the maximum penalties, now these are maximum. In Minnesota, third degree murder, 25 years. Second degree manslaughter, 10 years. Even then, most people are going to say that's not enough. Well, yeah. As attorneys, we know that it doesn't really happen like that. They don't just automatically get maximum penalties. There are things called sentencing guidelines that say, okay, yeah, this is the maximum, but we're going to give you a guideline of what this particular defendant should be charged with. And you take into account prior record, what happened in the course of that act being committed. And a person only gets the guidelines for maximum if they've had a prior record. And in this case with Mr. Floyd, with this particular officer, Minnesota's sentencing guidelines recommend 12 and a half years for the conviction of the murder count and only 4 years on the manslaughter charge. A lot of people are going to be really upset about this, and understandably, but the law has to balance between those defendants that are actually innocent and then of course ones that we have literal footage of the murder occurring. This is going to be a big issue.
It's a very unfortunate situation.
It's horrific, actually. Yeah.
But let's talk about solutions.
Yes.
Now, solutions to address this police brutality issue. Now, in Michigan, I know that in the wake of Floyd's death, the legislature has taken up a new bill that requires all new police officers to go through new requirements. So they have to go through implicit bias training. They have to learn about de-escalation techniques so that they don't have to even get to that level of force where they need to kill somebody, as well as undergoing a mental health screening before they can enter the police force, which is absolutely wonderful.
That's huge.
And I hope that other states are following. I don't know. I only really, keep track of Michigan.
Right.
Another thing that has happened in the past is that the United States government, the Department of Justice, has gotten involved when police departments have shown what's called a pattern, a practice of excessive force or displaying discriminatory conduct toward minorities. And the Justice Department will come in, investigate, and the police departments end up entering into a 5-year settlement agreement saying that they're willing to basically completely overhaul their policies and procedures, retrain their officers so that these type of actions do not continue in the future. Cleveland entered into one in 2015, Baltimore entered into one in 2017, and Chicago in 2019. So these consent or settlement agreements are common in police departments in urban areas across the country.
What you need to know right now are some main takeaways, just so you understand what's kind of going on. And from our video, we hope you got those, but let's just briefly go through them. 1, in order for a police officer to ever even arrest you, they have to have probable cause to do that. 2, if a police officer is going to use deadly force, then they have to believe that have a reasonable belief that they're at risk, that you are committing already deadly force on them or you're about to. And 3, murder isn't just a blanket charge. There's a lot of levels to it. It's not what we think, like, oh my God, they killed them, so they committed murder. There's a lot of levels to it, and it's state specific in a lot of ways.
And prosecutors have to submit evidence to prove what the law designates as that level is. So, people may think, oh, we have this, but there's certain evidentiary proofs that need to be made.
And the prosecutors want to ensure that they can at least get this person punished for this crime and not
for the level of proof that they have on hand. Lastly, this really is a horrible tragedy. Our hearts, me and Amina, our hearts go out to all of George Floyd's family, his friends, his loved ones. This is such a horrible thing that's going on, and it's really affecting all of America. We're all mourning right now George Floyd's death, as well as the deaths of all other people whose lives have really been taken prematurely by police officers. So we just hope moving forward that there's some type of changes made, because this is such a tragedy.
Yeah, at some point there has to be solutions put in place. So thanks for watching, and make sure you like and subscribe so that you get all the hottest legal news every week from the Ladies in Law.
That's another episode of Ladies in Law, not your average lawyers.
Rip it up, shake it up, rip it up, shake it up, rip it up, shake it up.